My name is Elena Torres, and this is the story of how I died in a hospital corridor and was reborn in a lawyer's office. I'm 31 years old, and until 6 weeks ago, I believed that family meant sacrifice. I believed that love was measured in wire transfers, and that being the responsible one was an honor, not a curse. I was wrong about all of it. It was a Thursday afternoon in downtown Seattle when my body finally gave up. The rain was doing what Seattle rain does best, turning the world into a gray watercolor painting, blurring the edges of everything. I was sitting at my desk on the 14th floor of Cascade Data Solutions, staring at a financial projection model that kept swimming in and out of focus. My hands were trembling so badly that my mouse kept slipping away from the cells I was trying to click. The tremor wasn't from cold, though the office air conditioning was arctic as always. It was from hunger, the kind of deep, cellular hunger that makes your body start eating itself from the inside out. The last real meal I'd eaten was 4 days ago. A small container of leftover rice and beans that I'd stretched across 3 separate sittings. My paycheck had come in exactly 1 week prior, direct deposited at midnight on Friday. By Saturday morning, it was gone. Not spent on anything frivolous, not wasted on luxuries. It had evaporated into the black hole of my family's needs, transferred in 3 separate transactions to 3 different people in 3 different states, none of whom were me. My stomach had stopped growling 2 days ago. Now it just ached, a constant hollow throb that had become the background music of my existence. I'd learned to function like this. I'd perfected the art of the concerned smile when colleagues asked if I wanted to join them for lunch. I'd mastered the excuse of being on a special diet, being too busy, having already eaten. The lies came easily now, smooth and practiced. What didn't come easily was the work. The numbers on my screen kept rearranging themselves. Revenue projections became nonsense. My vision would tunnel, darkening at the edges, then snap back to clarity. I was trying to calculate quarterly growth percentages, but I kept losing track of which column I was in. Around me, the office hummed with its usual Thursday afternoon energy. Someone was microwaving something that smelled like garlic and butter. The scent hit me like a physical blow, making saliva flood my mouth and my stomach contract violently. I grabbed my water bottle, the one I'd been refilling constantly from the break room tap, and took a long drink. Water was free. Water was my friend. Water was what I had. My phone buzzed on my desk, a text message. I didn't need to look to know who it was, but I looked anyway. It was from my sister, Carmen. The message was short and to the point, the way all her messages were lately. Did you send it? Landlord is threatening eviction. Need it today. I stared at the message, my vision blurring again. I had sent it. I'd sent every dollar I could spare, which was every dollar I had. I'd sent the rent money she needed, the $450 that was apparently the difference between her having a roof over her head and being on the street. What I hadn't sent was my own rent, which was due in 6 days, or money for food, or money for the gas tank that was currently showing an eighth of a tank, just barely enough to get me home if I was lucky. I started to type a response, but my fingers wouldn't cooperate. They felt thick and clumsy, like they belonged to someone else. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto my desk. My coworker, Jennifer, looked over from her cubicle, her eyebrows raised in concern. "Elena, you okay?" she asked. Her voice sounded distant, like she was speaking from the other end of a long tunnel. I tried to answer. I tried to say yes, I'm fine, just tired, just busy, just anything. But when I opened my mouth, no sound came out. The office lights, those harsh fluorescent tubes that had been giving me a headache all day, suddenly became unbearably bright. They pulsed and flickered, or maybe that was just my eyes. I gripped the edge of my desk, trying to steady myself, but the desk felt like it was tilting, sliding away from me. I need to stand up, I thought. I need to get some air, splash some water on my face, something. I pushed my chair back, the wheels squeaking against the industrial carpet. Standing up was a catastrophically bad decision. The moment I put weight on my legs, they simply stopped working. It wasn't a gradual collapse. It was instant. 1 second I was upright, the next I was falling. I saw the gray carpet rushing up to meet my face. I saw Jennifer's shocked expression, her mouth forming my name. I felt my knees hit first, a distant impact that should have hurt but didn't. Then my hands, trying instinctively to catch myself. Then my shoulder, my cheek, the cool, rough texture of the carpet against my skin. The last thing I heard was Jennifer screaming for help, her voice high and panicked. The last thing I saw was my computer monitor, still displaying that spreadsheet I'd been working on, the numbers meaningless now. And then there was nothing, just a heavy, peaceful darkness that swallowed everything. When I woke up, I wasn't on the office floor anymore. I was lying on something soft and papery in a room that smelled like antiseptic and anxiety. My eyes felt gummy and hard to open. My mouth was dry, tasting like metal and exhaustion. I forced my eyelids up, squinting against the light. I was in a small room, barely more than a closet, with pale blue walls and a single narrow window that showed the gray Seattle skyline. I was on a medical cot, the kind with the disposable paper sheet that crinkles every time you move. There was an IV in my arm, the needle taped down with clear medical tape. "Welcome back to the land of the living," voice said. I turned my head, moving carefully because everything felt fragile and disconnected. A woman in scrubs was sitting in a plastic chair beside the cot. She was probably in her late 50s, with short silver hair and kind, tired eyes. Her name tag read, Susan Chin, RN. "What happened?" I managed to croak out. My voice sounded like sandpaper. "You collapsed at your desk," Susan said, her tone matter of fact but not unkind. "Your coworkers called an ambulance, but by the time the paramedics got there, you were already starting to come around. They brought you here to the urgent care clinic in your building. You've been out for about 40 minutes. She gestured to the IV bag hanging above me. "Severe dehydration and hypoglycemia." "When's the last time you ate a real meal, honey?" I tried to remember. 4 days? 5? "I've been busy," I said weakly. Susan's expression said she'd heard that excuse before and didn't believe it for a second. "Busy," she repeated, her voice dry. "Right. Well, your body doesn't care how busy you are. Your blood sugar was dangerously low. Another few hours and you could have had a seizure or gone into a coma. You're lucky." Lucky. The word felt absurd. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. "There's something else," Susan said, and her voice changed, became gentler. "While you were out, someone came by. An older gentleman, very well dressed. He left this for you." She gestured to the small table beside the cot. I turned my head to look. Sitting on the table was a brown paper bag, the kind you'd pack a lunch in. It was neatly folded at the top, and written across the front in elegant black ink were 2 words, Elena Torres. My full name. Not Elena, not Torres, but both. Written in handwriting I'd never seen before. "Who was he?" I asked, my heart starting to beat faster. Susan shrugged. "He didn't give a name, just said he was a friend of the family and that you needed this. He had a security guard with him, professional-looking guy. They didn't stay long, just dropped off the bag and left." This is Revenge Stories, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Help us build this community so we can bring more interesting and exciting stories for you from around the world. Your help is much appreciated. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. My hands were shaking as I reached for the bag. It was heavier than it looked. I unfolded the top and looked inside. The smell that wafted out almost made me cry. Hot soup, real soup with vegetables and chicken, a thick sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a bottle of orange juice still cold, and underneath the food, something else. A large manila envelope, expensive looking, with my name written on it in the same elegant script. And clipped to the envelope, a business card. I picked up the card with trembling fingers. It was heavy cardstock embossed with raised lettering. Marcus Webb, attorney at law, Webb and Associates, New York, New York. There were 2 phone numbers, an office line, and a cell phone. I set the card down and reached for the envelope. My heart was pounding now, a sick, anxious rhythm. This wasn't normal. This wasn't how the world worked. Strangers didn't show up with food and lawyers' business cards when you collapsed at work. I opened the envelope, my fingers clumsy and shaking. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded in thirds and something else, something stiff and rectangular. I pulled out the paper first and unfolded it. The letter was typed, single-spaced on expensive cream-colored letterhead. At the top was an ornate logo, a stylized letter R. I started reading, and the world seemed to tilt again, but this time it had nothing to do with hunger. Dear Elena, it began, my name is Robert Castellanos, and I am the grandfather you've been told your entire life to forget. I am the man your father has spent 25 years calling a monster, a criminal, a selfish bastard who chose money over his own son. I won't waste your time defending myself. The truth is complicated and you deserve to hear it, but not now. Not in a letter you're reading while recovering from malnutrition caused by the people who are supposed to love you. I stopped breathing. Robert Castellanos. The name was like a bomb going off in my head. Robert Castellanos, my father's father, the grandfather I'd been told died when I was a baby. Or, wait, no, that wasn't the story. The story changed depending on who was telling it. Sometimes he was dead. Sometimes he'd abandoned the family. Sometimes he was a criminal who'd gone to prison. The one constant was that he was never, ever to be mentioned, never to be thought about, never to be considered part of our family. But he wasn't dead. He was alive. And apparently, he'd been watching me. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the letter. I forced myself to keep reading. I have been monitoring your situation for the past 3 years, the letter continued. I hired a private investigator, not to interfere, but to know. To know if you were all right, if your father had learned anything in the decades since he walked away from me, if you were being cared for the way a daughter should be. What I found broke my heart. I have watched you work 3 jobs to put yourself through college while your father gambled away his paychecks. I have watched you send money home every month, money you couldn't afford to send, while your sister traveled and partied and your parents lived beyond their means. I have watched your bank account drain to zero over and over again, watched you skip meals, watched you sacrifice everything for people who have never sacrificed anything for you. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and fast. I couldn't stop them. The investigator I hired was instructed to watch for a critical threshold, the letter went on. A point where your health was in danger. Yesterday, that threshold was crossed when you collapsed. My attorney, Marcus Webb, was given standing instructions to intervene immediately if this happened. He is the man who delivered this bag. He is also the executor of my estate and the trustee of a fund I have established in your name. I looked down at the envelope again. The rectangular thing I'd felt, I pulled it out. It was a check, a cashier's check, drawn on a private bank I'd never heard of, made out to Elena Torres. The amount had so many zeros I had to count them twice. $150,000. I made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Susan, the nurse, looked over at me with concern. "Honey, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" I shook my head, unable to speak, and turned back to the letter. "This check is an emergency fund," Robert's letter continued. "It is a fraction of what is waiting for you, but it is enough to stabilize your life immediately. Pay your debts, feed yourself, take time to breathe. The attorney, Marcus Webb, has complete instructions. Call him. He will explain everything. But Elena, there is one condition, and it is not negotiable. You must stop sending money to your family. Not a dollar, not a cent. The trust I have established for you is substantial. Upon my death, which my doctors tell me will be within the next 6 months, you will inherit everything. But the inheritance is protected. It is structured so that you cannot be coerced into giving it away. If you continue to fund your family's irresponsibility, the trust will lock. Marcus has the authority to freeze all distributions until you can prove you are acting in your own self-interest and not under duress. I stared at the words, reading them over and over. Stop sending money. Protected. Cannot be coerced. I am not trying to buy your love. The letter concluded. I am trying to give you what I failed to give your father, boundaries, the ability to say no and have it mean something. I am dying, Elena, and I cannot die knowing I left you drowning in their dysfunction. You did not ask to be born into this family. You did not ask to be the responsible one, the strong one, the one who fixes everything. But you have been all of those things, and it has nearly killed you. Let me give you one gift before I go. Let me give you permission to save yourself. Your grandfather, Robert Castellanos. I folded the letter carefully, my hands still shaking, and put it back in the envelope along with the check. Then I reached for the food. The soup was still warm, rich and savory, full of tender chicken and soft vegetables. I ate it slowly, mechanically, tears running down my face and dripping into the broth. It was the best thing I had ever tasted, not because it was fancy or expensive, but because it was the first food in years that someone had given me without asking for anything in return. Susan watched me eat, her expression soft and knowing. "That must be some letter," she said quietly. "It is," I whispered. "It really is." When I was done eating, when the soup container was empty and the sandwich was gone and the orange juice bottle was drained, I picked up Marcus Webb's business card. I stared at it for a long time. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed the cell number. He answered on the second ring. "Elena," he said, his voice smooth and professional. "I was hoping you'd call. How are you feeling?" "Confused," I said honestly, "and terrified." "Both very reasonable reactions," Marcus said. "I'm in Seattle for the next 2 days. Would you be available to meet tomorrow morning? There's a lot we need to discuss, and it's not a conversation for a phone call." "Yes," I said. "Yes, I can meet." "Good," Marcus said. "There's a cafe called the Wandering Goat on Pine Street. Do you know it?" I did. It was a quiet place, the kind of coffee shop where you could talk without being overheard. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, Marcus said. And Elena, deposit that check today. I mean it. Go to your bank right now and deposit it. You're going to need it. The call ended. I sat there on the medical cot holding my phone, the empty soup container beside me, and Robert's letter in my lap. In the space of an hour, my entire world had been turned upside down. The grandfather I'd been told was dead or gone or monstrous had reached out from beyond, or nearly beyond, and handed me a lifeline. A lifeline with a price. I had to let go of the people I'd been drowning myself to save. Susan came back over, checking my IV. "You've got some color back in your cheeks," she said approvingly. "That's good, but I'm serious, Elena. You need to eat regularly. Your body can't function like this." "I know," I said quietly, and for the first time in years, I meant it. I knew. I left the urgent care clinic an hour later, the IV removed, the discharge papers signed, a pamphlet about proper nutrition clutched in my hand. I walked out into the gray Seattle afternoon, the rain still falling in its endless gentle way, and I went straight to my bank. The teller's eyes widened when she saw the check. She called over a manager, a nervous-looking man in his 40s who examined the check under a light as if checking for forgery. "This will have a hold period," he said apologetically. "A check this size, we need to verify funds. It'll be 7 to 10 business days before it fully clears." "That's fine," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, calm and steady. "Just deposit it." He did, and just like that, my bank account balance went from $43 to $150,043. I walked out of the bank in a daze, the receipt clutched in my hand, and sat down on a bench outside. I just sat there in the rain, not caring that I was getting wet, staring at the numbers on the receipt. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Carmen said you sent her rent money, but it wasn't enough. She needs another $200 for late fees. Can you send it tonight?" I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, ready to type out my usual response, ready to promise I'd figure it out, ready to transfer more money I didn't have. But then I thought about Robert's letter. I thought about the condition. I thought about the word boundaries. I typed a different message. "I can't send any more money right now. I just collapsed at work from not eating. I need to take care of myself." I hit send before I could second guess it. The response came back almost instantly. "What do you mean you collapsed? Are you okay? What happened?" Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Are you hurt?" Just, "What happened?" Followed immediately by another message. "Can you at least send 100? Carmen is really freaking out." I closed my messages and turned off my phone. I sat there on the bench in the rain, and for the first time in my adult life, I did nothing. I didn't scramble to fix it. I didn't panic. I didn't transfer money I didn't have. I just sat and breathed and let the rain wash over me. The next morning, I walked into the Wandering Goat at exactly 10 o'clock. Marcus Webb was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He was older than I'd expected, maybe mid-60s, with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He stood up when he saw me, extending his hand. "Elena Torres," he said, "it's a genuine pleasure to finally meet you in person." We shook hands. His grip was firm and warm. I sat down across from him, my heart pounding. Marcus pushed one of the coffee cups toward me. "Black coffee," he said. "I hope that's all right. I wasn't sure how you took it." "It's perfect," I said. And it was. Marcus opened a leather briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Let me start by saying this," he said, his voice serious. "Everything I'm about to tell you is real. This is not a scam, not a joke, not a mistake. Your grandfather, Robert Castellanos, is a very wealthy man, and he has chosen to leave the vast majority of his estate to you. My job as his attorney and the executor of his will is to ensure that transition happens smoothly and that you are protected in the process. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Marcus opened the folder and pulled out several documents. Robert established a trust 3 years ago called the Elena Torres Protection Fund. Yes, he actually named it that. The trust currently holds approximately $8.3 million in assets, liquid investments, real estate, stocks, bonds. When Robert passes, which his doctors estimate will happen within the next 4 to 6 months, the trust will transfer entirely to you. You will be the sole beneficiary. $8.3 million. The number was so large it felt abstract, impossible. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Your family, Marcus continued, will receive a token inheritance, $5,000 each, to your father, your mother, and your sister. Just enough to satisfy legal requirements and prevent them from contesting the will. The rest is yours. Why? I finally managed to ask. Why me? Why not my father? He's his son. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. That's a complicated story, and you deserve to hear all of it. The short version is that Robert and your father had a falling out 25 years ago. Your father wanted money to start a business, a restaurant. Robert thought the business plan was reckless and refused to fund it. Your father accused Robert of not believing in him, of being controlling and manipulative. Robert accused your father of being entitled and irresponsible. Things were said that couldn't be unsaid. Your father walked away, took your mother with him, and told Robert he never wanted to see him again. I closed my eyes. That sounded exactly like something my father would do. He'd always had big dreams and no follow-through. He'd started a dozen businesses over the years, all of them failures, all of them funded by loans from friends or family that were never repaid. Robert tried to reach out over the years, Marcus continued. He sent letters, gifts for you and your sister when you were children. Everything was returned unopened. 3 years ago, he sent a certified letter offering to pay for your college education. Your father sent it back with a note that said, and I quote, "Keep your blood money, old man. We don't need you." That's when Robert hired the investigator. He realized that if he wanted to know if you were okay, he couldn't rely on your father to tell him the truth. And what did the investigator find? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Marcus's expression darkened. He found that you've been financially supporting your entire family since you were 22 years old, that you work 50-hour weeks and send 70% of your paycheck home, that your father gambles, your mother enables him, and your sister has never held a job for more than 6 months. He found that you've been living in a studio apartment with broken heating, eating one meal a day, and ignoring your own medical needs to keep them afloat. And he found that they've never once, not once, said thank you. The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. I'd known it, on some level, but hearing it said out loud by a stranger made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Robert was furious, Marcus said quietly. Not at you, at them, at himself for waiting so long to act. He spent the last 3 years restructuring his entire estate to protect you. The trust is ironclad. No one can touch it but you. But Elena, the condition is real. If you continue to send them money, if you continue to let them use you, the trust will lock. I will freeze all distributions until I am convinced you are acting freely and not under emotional coercion. How will you know? I asked. How will you know if I'm being coerced? Marcus smiled, a thin, sharp smile. That's my job. I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what financial abuse looks like, and I know what freedom looks like. If you start wiring money to your family the day after you inherit, that's not freedom. That's habit. That's guilt, and I won't allow it. I thought about my phone, still turned off in my purse. I thought about the messages I hadn't answered, the calls I hadn't returned. What do I do? I whispered. You set boundaries, Marcus said. His voice was firm but kind. You tell them no. You stop answering every call. Stop sending every dollar they ask for. You let them experience the consequences of their own choices. And if they can't respect that, if they harass you or threaten you or try to manipulate you, then you cut contact entirely. The trust includes funds for a lawyer, a therapist, and security if you need it. Whatever it takes to keep you safe. I sat there in that coffee shop, the noise of Seattle waking up around me, and I felt something shift inside my chest. It was subtle, like a lock turning, like a door opening. For the first time in my life, I had permission. Not just permission to say no, but permission to be protected when I did. I wasn't alone anymore. Okay, I said. My voice was stronger now. Okay, tell me what I need to do. Marcus spent the next 2 hours walking me through everything. He had documents, spreadsheets, timelines. He showed me Robert's will, the trust structure, the investment portfolio. He explained how the money was protected, how the disbursements would work, what my responsibilities would be as the beneficiary. It was overwhelming, but Marcus was patient. He answered every question, explained every clause, made sure I understood. The emergency fund you deposited yesterday, he said, that's separate from the trust. That's a gift, free and clear. Use it however you need. Pay your rent, buy groceries, take some time off work if you need to. The trust itself won't activate until Robert passes. But that money is yours now. I want to meet him, I said suddenly. Robert, my grandfather. Before he dies, I want to meet him. Marcus's expression softened. He was hoping you'd say that. He's in New York, at his home. He's too ill to travel now, but if you can make the trip, he would very much like to see you. I'll go, I said. I'll go this weekend. Marcus nodded. I'll arrange everything. Flights, hotel, transportation. Consider it handled. We shook hands again as we left the cafe. I walked back to my apartment in a daze, the folder of documents tucked under my arm. When I got home, I sat on my couch, the one with the spring that poked, through the cushion, and I turned my phone back on. The messages came flooding in. 37 text messages, 15 missed calls, 4 voicemails. My mother, my father, my sister, even an aunt I hadn't heard from in years. All of them asking the same questions. What did I mean I couldn't send money? What was wrong with me? Didn't I care about family? How could I be so selfish? There was one message from Carmen that made my blood run cold. Mom told me what you said about collapsing. That's really manipulative, Elena, using your health to guilt trip us when we're struggling. I thought you were better than that. I stared at that message for a long time. They'd taken my near-death experience and turned it into a weapon against me. They'd made me the villain for nearly dying while keeping them afloat. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I opened my banking app and did something I'd never done before. I set up automatic transfers, not to them, to me. I scheduled recurring transfers from my checking account to a new savings account I created right there on my couch. Every paycheck, 20% would go automatically into savings before I could even think about sending it away. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was mine. That Friday, I flew to New York. Marcus had arranged everything, just as he'd promised. First-class ticket, car service from the airport, a hotel room in Manhattan that was nicer than any place I'd ever stayed. I felt like I was living someone else's life. Saturday morning, the car took me to Robert's home. It wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined something cold and corporate, a sterile penthouse or a mansion that looked like a museum. Instead, it was a brownstone in Brooklyn, warm and lived in, with flower boxes in the windows and a bright red door. Marcus met me outside. "He's upstairs," Marcus said. "He's having a good day today. Alert? Comfortable? But Elena, I need to prepare you. He's very ill. He looks frail. Don't let that frighten you." I nodded, my heart hammering. Marcus led me inside, through a cozy living room filled with books and photographs, up a narrow staircase to the second floor. He knocked gently on a door at the end of the hall. "Come in," a voice called. It was thin and tired, but there was strength underneath. Marcus opened the door and gestured for me to enter. The room was bright, filled with afternoon sunlight. There was a hospital bed against one wall, surrounded by medical equipment, monitors beeping softly. And in the bed, propped up on pillows, was an old man. He was thin, his skin pale and papery, his hair white and sparse, but his eyes were sharp and dark and alive. They locked onto me the moment I walked in. "Elena," he said, his voice cracked with emotion. "My God, you look just like your grandmother." I walked toward the bed slowly, not sure what to say, not sure what to do. Robert reached out a trembling hand, and I took it. His grip was weak but warm. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair beside the bed. "Please, I don't have the energy to crane my neck." I sat. We looked at each other for a long moment, this dying man and the granddaughter he'd never met. "I'm sorry," Robert said finally. "I'm sorry I waited so long. I'm sorry I let my pride and your father's stubbornness keep me from knowing you. I'm sorry you've spent your whole life carrying weight that was never yours to carry." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "I don't understand," I said. "Why did you watch me struggle? If you've known for 3 years, why didn't you help sooner?" Robert's face twisted with regret. "Because I was a foolish, stubborn old man. I kept thinking your father would come to his senses. I kept thinking he'd wake up one day and realize what he was doing to you. I kept thinking I had more time. And then Marcus called me 3 days ago and told me you'd collapsed at work from malnutrition, and I realized I'd made the same mistake twice. I'd waited too long again." "The food," I said. "You sent the food." "I did," Robert said. "Marcus flew out the moment we got the alert from the investigator. I told him to make sure you had a real meal, something warm and nourishing. And I told him to give you the letter and the check because I couldn't wait anymore. I couldn't risk you dying while I was busy being careful." We talked for hours. Robert told me about his life, about building his business from nothing, about meeting my grandmother, about my father's childhood. He told me about the fight they'd had, how both of them had said things they regretted, how neither of them had been willing to bend. "Your father wanted to prove he didn't need me," Robert said, "and I wanted him to admit he'd been wrong. We were both idiots, and you paid the price." "Did you try to contact me?" I asked. "When I was a kid." "Every year," Robert said. "Every birthday, every Christmas. I sent letters, gifts, cards. Your father sent them all back unopened. After you turned 18, I tried to find you directly, but you'd moved around so much for college, different addresses, different schools. By the time I tracked you down, you were already trapped, already sending money home, already drowning. That's when I hired the investigator. I needed to know the scope of it before I could figure out how to help." "The trust," I said. The condition. Why make it so strict? Robert's expression hardened. Because I know my son. I know your mother. I know they will come for you with guilt and tears and manipulation, and they will not stop until they've bled you dry. The trust isn't just money, Elena. It's a legal boundary. It's a wall between you and them. Without it, you'd give everything away trying to fix people who don't want to be fixed. I've seen it happen. I watched it happen with your father. He drove away everyone who ever tried to help him, and then he blamed them when he failed. I won't let him do that to you. We talked until Robert grew tired, his words slurring, his eyes drooping. A nurse came in, a kind-faced woman who'd clearly been caring for him for a while. She gave him medication and adjusted his pillows. "You should rest now, Mr. Castellanos," she said gently. Robert squeezed my hand one last time. "Come back tomorrow," he said. "Please, we have more to talk about." "I will," I promised. I visited Robert every day for the rest of the weekend. We talked about everything, filling in the gaps of 31 years. He told me stories about my grandmother, who'd passed away 10 years ago. He told me about his business, about the choices he'd made, the regrets he carried. And he asked me about my life. Really asked, really listened. He wanted to know about my work, my dreams, the things I'd given up. On Sunday evening before I flew back to Seattle, Robert gave me something. It was a small velvet box worn at the edges. Inside was a necklace, a delicate gold chain with a small pendant shaped like a compass. "This was your grandmother's," Robert said. "She wore it every day. She used to say it reminded her that no matter how lost she felt, she could always find her way home. I want you to have it." I put it on right there, the chain cool against my skin. "Thank you," I whispered. "No," Robert said, his voice fierce despite his weakness. "Thank you. Thank you for giving an old fool a chance to make things right. Thank you for being strong enough to survive what they put you through. And thank you for being brave enough to accept help. That's the hardest part, letting someone save you." I hugged him carefully, mindful of the tubes and wires, and I felt his frail arms wrap around me. "I love you, Grandpa," I said. It was the first time I'd ever said those words to him. "I love you too, sweetheart," he said. "Now go. Live your life. Be free." I flew back to Seattle that night, the compass necklace warm against my chest, and I knew everything had changed. I wasn't the same woman who'd collapsed on that office floor. I was someone new, someone who'd been given permission to want more, to be more, to take up space in the world. The next few weeks were a blur of change. I deposited another paycheck and watched the automatic transfer move money into my savings account. I went grocery shopping and bought real food, vegetables and fruit and fresh bread, things I'd told myself were too expensive. I ate 3 meals a day and felt my body slowly begin to heal. The constant headaches faded. The trembling in my hands stopped. I had energy again, real energy, not the jittery, anxious energy of running on empty. I stopped answering my family's calls. Every time my phone rang and I saw my mother's name, or Carmen's name, or my father's name, I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the messages once, just to make sure there wasn't a real emergency, and then I deleted them. The messages followed a predictable pattern. First guilt, then anger, then accusation, then more guilt. But I didn't respond. I held the boundary. 3 weeks after I returned from New York, I got a call from Marcus. I knew before he said anything. I could hear it in his voice. "Elena," he said gently. "Robert passed away this morning, peacefully in his sleep. He wasn't in pain. I sat down on my couch, the one I'd recently replaced with something that didn't have broken springs, and I cried. I cried for the grandfather I'd only just met. I cried for the years we'd lost. I cried for the cruel waste of it all, the stubborn pride that had kept a family broken for a quarter century. But underneath the grief, there was something else: gratitude. Robert had given me the greatest gift anyone had ever given me. He'd given me a future. The funeral was small, held in Brooklyn at a church Robert had attended. I flew back to New York, and this time I paid for the ticket myself, using money from the emergency fund. It felt significant somehow, that small act of independence. Marcus met me at the church. There were maybe 20 people there: business associates, old friends, the staff who'd cared for Robert in his final months. My family was not there. Marcus had sent them notification of the funeral as required by law, but they hadn't come. I wasn't surprised. They'd made their choice 25 years ago, and they'd stuck to it even as Robert was dying. After the service, Marcus drove me to his office in Manhattan. It was time for the official reading of the will. We sat in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out the familiar leather-bound folder. "This is straightforward," he said. "Robert's will is very clear. The bulk of his estate, approximately $8.3 million, transfers to the Elena Torres Protection Fund. You are the sole beneficiary. There are also several smaller bequests to his staff and to charity. And there are the token inheritances for your family members." He slid several documents across the table to me. I read through them slowly, making sure I understood. It was all there, exactly as Marcus had explained weeks ago: the trust, the protections, the conditions. "Your family will be notified this week," Marcus said. "They'll receive letters informing them of the token inheritance and of the existence of the trust. Elena, I need you to be prepared. When they find out, they will come for you. Not legally, they have no legal standing, but emotionally. They will use every tactic they know to try to convince you to share the money." "I know," I said, and I did know. I'd been preparing myself for this moment. "I've taken the liberty of drafting a cease and desist letter," Marcus continued. "If they harass you, if they threaten you, if they try to manipulate or coerce you, you can have this letter sent. It's a legal warning. If they ignore it, we can pursue a restraining order." He handed me another document. I read it carefully. It was exactly what he'd described: a formal legal letter warning against harassment and financial coercion. I folded it and put it in my purse. "I hope I don't need this," I said. "So do I," Marcus said, "but it's better to have it." I flew back to Seattle that afternoon. As the plane took off, I looked out the window at New York disappearing below me, and I thought about Robert. I thought about his stubbornness and his regret, his pride and his love. He'd given me everything, but more than the money. He'd given me something my own parents never had. He'd believed I was worth saving. The letters went out to my family on a Wednesday. I know because that's when my phone exploded. It started at 6 in the morning Seattle time, which meant 9 in the morning in Ohio, where my family lived. My phone rang and rang and rang. I didn't answer. The voicemails piled up. The text messages came in floods. I finally turned off my phone and left it in a drawer. That evening, I turned it back on long enough to check the messages. There were 43 voicemails. I didn't listen to most of them. I didn't need to. But I listened to one, the first one, from my father. His voice was shaking with rage. $8 million, he spat. $8 million and we get 5,000? 5,000? That money was mine. That was my inheritance. He stole it from me and gave it to you. How could you do this? How could you go behind our backs and steal from your own family? You're a thief, Elena. You're a goddamn thief. I deleted the message. I turned off my phone again, and I sat in my quiet apartment feeling nothing but a strange calm. He'd called me a thief for accepting an inheritance that was legally and rightfully mine. He'd called me selfish for not giving him money that had never belonged to him. He'd proven in that one voicemail everything Robert had warned me about. The harassment continued for days. My email inbox filled with messages from my mother, long, rambling screeds about betrayal and family and obligation. Carmen sent me a series of texts that started with pleading and ended with threats. I can't believe you do this to us. We're going to lose everything. I hope you're happy. I hope you enjoy your blood money. I changed my phone number. I blocked their email addresses. I set up filters so that any messages from them would go straight to a folder I never had to look at. And slowly, the noise quieted. But the real test came 6 weeks after Robert's death. I was at work, actually focused on my job for the first time in months, when Jennifer from the next cubicle came over looking uncomfortable. "Elena," she said quietly, "there's someone here to see you, in the lobby. She says she's your sister." My heart sank. Carmen had come to Seattle. She'd gotten on a plane and flown across the country to confront me in person. I thought about refusing to see her. I thought about calling security and having her escorted out. But I also thought about Robert, about boundaries, about the cease and desist letter in my purse. I needed to face this. I needed to show myself I could hold the line even when they were standing right in front of me. "Tell her I'll be down in 5 minutes," I said. I went to the bathroom first. I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked. I'd gained back the weight I'd lost. My skin had color again. My eyes weren't sunken and bruised anymore. I looked healthy. I looked strong. I touched the compass necklace at my throat, feeling its weight, and I took a deep breath. Carmen was waiting in the lobby of my building, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, pulled back in a messy ponytail. She'd lost weight, but not in a healthy way. She looked gaunt and frantic. When she saw me step out of the elevator, her face crumpled. "Elena," she said, rushing toward me. "Elena, please, we need to talk." "Outside," I said quietly. I didn't want to have this conversation in front of my coworkers. We went out to the plaza in front of the building. It was a cool October afternoon, the Seattle sky doing its usual slate gray thing. I stood facing Carmen, my arms crossed, waiting. "I can't believe you wouldn't return my calls," Carmen said. Her voice was shaking. "I can't believe you just cut us off like that. Do you have any idea what you've done to us?" "I know exactly what I've done," I said calmly. "I stopped sending money, that's all." "That's all?" Carmen's voice rose to a near shriek. "That's all? Elena, we're about to lose the house. Dad's behind on his car payments. Mom can't afford her medications. And you're sitting here in your fancy office building acting like none of that is your problem?" "It's not my problem," I said. The words felt foreign in my mouth, but I pushed through. "Those are your problems, yours and Mom's and Dad's, not mine." "We're family," Carmen said, and now the tears were flowing. "Family helps each other. How can you be so cruel?" "Where were you when I collapsed at work?" I asked. The question seemed to surprise her. "Where were you when I was starving myself to pay your rent? Did you ever ask if I was okay? Did you ever wonder how I was managing?" You always seemed fine, Carmen said weakly. I wasn't fine, I said. I was dying, slowly. And none of you noticed because you didn't want to notice. Because as long as I was fine, you could keep taking. This is about that money, Carmen said, her expression shifting from tears to anger. That money that dead old man left you. You think you're better than us now. You think. Stop, I said, cutting her off. This isn't about the money. This is about the fact that you flew all the way across the country to try to guilt me into giving you something that isn't yours. This is about the fact that you can't accept no for an answer. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folded cease and desist letter. I handed it to Carmen. What is this? She asked suspiciously. Read it, I said. She unfolded the letter. I watched her face as she read, watched the color drain from her cheeks. You're threatening to sue me? She whispered. Your own sister? I'm warning you, I said. That letter is a warning. If you continue to harass me, if you continue to show up at my workplace or contact me demanding money, I will pursue legal action. The trust I inherited has very specific protections in place. My attorney has full authority to enforce them. This is insane, Carmen said, her voice breaking. This is cruel and insane and it's a boundary, I said. It's me finally learning to say no. You can hate me for it. Mom and Dad can hate me for it, but I'm not going back to the way things were. Carmen stared at me, the letter trembling in her hand. For a moment, I thought she might tear it up, might throw it in my face, but she didn't. She just folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. I don't even know who you are anymore, she said quietly. I'm someone who eats 3 meals a day, I said. I'm someone who sleeps at night without panicking about bills. I'm someone who's learning that taking care of myself isn't selfish. It's necessary. That's who I am now. Carmen turned and walked away without another word. I watched her go, watched her disappear into the Seattle afternoon, and I felt something settle in my chest. It wasn't relief exactly. It was more like resignation. The family I'd thought I had, the family I'd sacrificed everything for, had never really existed. I'd been propping up an illusion, and now the illusion was gone. I went back upstairs to my office. I sat down at my desk, looked at the spreadsheet I'd been working on, and I got back to work. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because this job, this life, was mine. The months after that confrontation with Carmen were strange and quiet. My family stopped trying to contact me directly. The emails stopped. The calls stopped. I heard through distant relatives, people I barely knew who felt compelled to reach out and tell me what they'd heard, that my parents were angry, that they were telling anyone who would listen that I'd stolen their inheritance, that I'd abandoned them in their time of need. I heard that Carmen had moved back home, that she was working part-time at a grocery store and hating it. I felt bad about that, about Carmen struggling, but I also knew, with the clarity that comes from distance and therapy, that her struggles were not my responsibility. She was 28 years old. She was capable of working. She was capable of taking care of herself. She'd just never had to before because I'd always been there to catch her. I started therapy in November. Marcus had given me the name of a therapist who specialized in family estrangement and financial abuse. Dr. Sarah Kim was in her 40s, calm and insightful, and she didn't let me get away with anything. In our first session, I tried to minimize what had happened. They weren't abusive, I said. They didn't hit me or anything. They just needed help. Elena, Dr. Kim said gently, you collapsed from malnutrition because you were sending them all your money. That's abuse. It doesn't matter that they didn't hit you. They nearly killed you. It took months of therapy for me to really internalize that, to understand that love shouldn't hurt, that family shouldn't cost everything, that I had been conditioned from childhood to believe my worth was measured in what I could give. By spring, I'd made more changes. I'd left Cascade Data Solutions and taken a new job at a smaller company, one with better hours and a focus on work-life balance. I was making less money, but I didn't need as much anymore. The trust was generating income, and I'd learned to live within my real means, not the means of four people. I moved to a new apartment, a bright two-bedroom place in a neighborhood I actually liked. I bought real furniture, the kind that didn't come from thrift stores or curbs. I hung art on the walls. I got a cat, a gray tabby I named Compass, after the necklace I wore every day. I was building a life that was mine, and it was terrifying and exhilarating and sometimes desperately lonely. But it was mine. In June, exactly 1 year after I'd collapsed in that office, I did something I'd been planning for months. I established a scholarship fund through the local community college. It was for students who were financially independent, who were working their way through school without family support. The application required an essay about setting boundaries and choosing yourself. I funded it with money from the trust, money Robert had left me with the explicit instruction to use it to help people like I'd been. The first year I awarded scholarships to 5 students. I met each of them, heard their stories. One was a young man who'd been disowned by his family for being gay. One was a woman who'd left an abusive marriage and was starting over at 35. One was a girl who'd aged out of foster care and had no one. Each of them had made the terrifying choice to prioritize themselves over the people who were supposed to love them. Meeting them, hearing their stories, I realized something profound. I wasn't alone. I'd never been alone. There were thousands of people out there who'd been in my position, who'd been the responsible one, the strong one, the one who held everything together until they broke. And we'd all learned the same lesson. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. By the time the first anniversary of Robert's death rolled around, I'd built something I never thought I'd have. A life that felt stable and safe and mine. I had friends, real friends who didn't ask me for money. I had a job I liked. I had a home I was proud of. And I had peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you're living authentically, even when it's hard. On the anniversary, I flew back to New York and visited Robert's grave. It was in a quiet cemetery in Brooklyn under a large oak tree. The headstone was simple, just his name and his dates and a line from a poem he'd loved. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. I sat there in the grass, Compass the cat in a carrier beside me because I'd brought her with me, and I talked to him. I told him about the scholarship fund. I told him about therapy, about the new apartment, about Carmen's letter and my decision not to respond. I told him about the life I was building, piece by piece, day by day. "Thank you," I said out loud, my voice cracking. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for believing I was worth saving." The wind rustled through the oak leaves, and for a moment I could have sworn I felt a presence, warm and approving. Maybe it was Robert, maybe it was just my imagination, but either way, I felt seen. I felt loved. I felt free. That evening, I had dinner with Marcus at a small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn. We'd stayed in touch over the year, monthly phone calls to discuss the trust and the investments, but also just to talk. He'd become something like a friend, or maybe a surrogate uncle, someone who'd known Robert who understood what I'd been through. "You look good," Marcus said, studying me across the table. "Healthy, happy." "I feel good," I said, and I meant it. Robert would be proud, Marcus said. Not just of how you've managed the money, though you've done that brilliantly, but of who you've become. You've honored his legacy in the best possible way. We ate and talked, and as the evening wound down, Marcus pulled an envelope from his briefcase. I wasn't sure when to give you this, he said. Robert left it with instructions that I should give it to you on the 1-year anniversary of his death, or sooner if I felt you were ready. I think you're ready. I took the envelope. It was heavy paper, expensive, with my name written on the front in Robert's familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short letter, just 1 page, and a photograph. The photo was old, the colors faded. It showed a young woman, maybe 30, with dark hair and a bright smile. She was standing in front of the same Brooklyn brownstone where Robert had died, holding a baby. I looked at the letter. My dearest Elena, it read. If you're reading this, I am gone, and you have made it through your first year of freedom. I am so proud of you. The woman in the photograph is your grandmother, my wife, Maria. The baby she's holding is your father, just 3 months old. This was taken outside our home, the home where I spent my last days, the home I hope you will visit whenever you need to feel connected to your history. Maria was the strongest person I ever knew. She came from nothing, built a life through sheer determination and grace. She would have loved you so much. You have her strength, her resilience, her kindness. But you also have something she had to fight for her whole life, and something I'm giving you now, the freedom to choose. You don't owe anyone your life, Elena. Not me, not your father, not your mother or sister. You owe yourself the chance to discover who you are when you're not carrying the weight of everyone else's choices. Live boldly, love deeply, set boundaries fiercely, and know that wherever I am watching over you with pride and love. Your grandfather, always, Robert. I couldn't see the letter anymore through my tears. Marcus reached across the table and squeezed my hand. He really did love you, Marcus said quietly. In the end, you were the thing he was proudest of. Not his business, not his money. You. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope with the photograph. I'm going to frame this, I said. I'm going to put it in my apartment where I can see it every day. That's a good idea, Marcus said. We left the restaurant and walked through Brooklyn as the summer evening cooled. The neighborhood was alive with people, families having dinner, kids playing in the street, life happening all around us. Marcus walked me back to my hotel. What will you do now? He asked. You have the money, the freedom. What do you want? I thought about that question for a long moment. What did I want? For so many years, I'd been focused on what everyone else wanted, what everyone else needed. I'd never stopped to ask myself what I wanted. I want to help people, I said finally. People like me, people who are trapped. I want to expand the scholarship fund. Maybe start a foundation, something bigger. I want Robert's money to do what he meant it to do, set people free. Marcus smiled. That's exactly what he hoped you'd say. This is Revenge Stories, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Help us build this community so we can bring more interesting and exciting stories for you from around the world. Your help is much appreciated. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. I flew back to Seattle the next day, but I felt different, lighter, more certain of who I was and who I wanted to be. Over the next few months, I worked with Marcus to establish the Castellanos Freedom Foundation. It was dedicated to helping people escape financial abuse from family members. We offered grants, legal assistance, therapy referrals, and emergency funds. We created support groups and educational resources. We built the thing I'd needed when I was drowning, a lifeline for people who were being told that setting boundaries made them selfish. The foundation grew faster than I expected. Stories poured in, hundreds of them, thousands of them. Adult children supporting aging parents who refused to budget. Siblings carrying the weight of brothers and sisters who wouldn't work. Grandchildren paying off grandparents' debts. The pattern was always the same. One person designated as strong, responsible, capable, and everyone else leaning on them until they broke. We helped them. One by one, we helped them set boundaries, get legal protection, find therapy, rebuild their lives. And every person we helped felt like honoring Robert, like taking the gift he'd given me and passing it forward. 2 years after Robert's death, I got a letter. It came to the Foundation's office, forwarded to me by our staff. The return address was in Ohio. My heart sank when I saw it. I almost threw it away, but something made me open it. The letter was from Carmen. Her handwriting was neater than I remembered, more controlled. "Dear Elena," it began, "I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. I'm writing because my therapist suggested it might help me and because I owe you an apology. A real one, not the manipulative kind I used to give. You were right about everything. About me, about Mom and Dad, about the way we treated you. I've been in therapy for a year now, working on myself, trying to understand why I was the way I was. I've learned a lot. I've learned that I was entitled and lazy and cruel. I've learned that I used you because it was easier than taking care of myself. I've learned that when you set boundaries, I felt like you were abandoning me, but really you were just refusing to let me drown you anymore. I'm working now, a real job, full time, with benefits. I'm paying my own rent. I'm managing my own money. It's hard and I hate it sometimes, but I'm doing it. I'm learning to be responsible finally. Mom and Dad are still angry. They still talk about you like you're a villain. I don't engage when they do. I'm learning to set my own boundaries with them too. I don't know if we'll ever have a relationship again. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what we did to you. I see how wrong it was. And I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry. I hope you're happy, Elena. I hope you're living the life you deserve. You certainly earned it. Your sister, Carmen. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer in the same place I kept Robert's letters and the photograph of my grandmother. I didn't respond. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday enough time would pass and enough healing would happen that Carmen and I could have a conversation. But not today. Today, I was still protecting myself, still holding the boundary, still choosing me. That evening, I went home to my apartment, to Compass curled up on the couch, to the framed photograph of my grandmother on the wall, to the life I'd built from the ashes of who I used to be. I made dinner, a real dinner with vegetables and protein and care. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, and when I was done, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and watched the sunset over Seattle. The city was beautiful in the fading light, all purple and gold and shadow. From up here, I could see everything, the Space Needle in the distance, the glittering water of Puget Sound, the mountains rising like sentinels on the horizon. I could see the life I'd almost lost and the life I'd fought to build. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Saw the Foundation's latest report. Robert would be so proud. I'm proud. Well done, Elena. I smiled and texted back, "Thank you for everything." I set my phone down and touched the compass necklace at my throat, feeling its familiar weight. Robert had told me it would help me find my way home. At the time, I'd thought he meant his home, the brownstone in Brooklyn. But now I understood. Home wasn't a place. Home was this: peace, safety, the freedom to choose myself without guilt. Home was the knowledge that I was enough exactly as I was, without having to earn my worth through sacrifice. I'd been taught my whole life that family meant giving until it hurt, that love was measured in how much you could endure. But Robert had taught me something different. He'd taught me that real love, healthy love, protective love, looked like boundaries. It looked like saying no. It looked like someone stepping in and saying, "Enough. You deserve better." I took a sip of my tea and looked out at the city, at the life I'd built, at the future stretching out before me, full of possibility. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop, wasn't bracing for the next crisis, wasn't calculating how much I could give without breaking. I was just here, in this moment, breathing and alive and free. My revenge wasn't dramatic. There was no courtroom showdown, no public humiliation, no moment of triumph where my family fell to their knees and begged forgiveness. My revenge was quieter than that, more profound. My revenge was this: I survived. I healed. I built a life where their opinions didn't matter anymore, where their needs didn't control me, where their guilt couldn't reach me. My revenge was learning that the opposite of family isn't loneliness, it's peace. And peace, I'd discovered, was worth more than all the forced connections in the world. I stayed on that balcony until the stars came out, tiny pinpricks of light in the vast, dark sky. And I made a promise to myself, the same promise I made every day now. I would never again shrink myself to make someone else comfortable. I would never again starve myself to feed someone else's ego. I would never again apologize for taking up space, for having needs, for being human. I was Elena Torres, and I was finally free. And that freedom, hard won and carefully guarded, was the greatest gift I'd ever received. Not the money, though the money helped. Not the trust, though the trust protected me. The gift was permission. Permission to live. Permission to thrive. Permission to be enough just as I was. And I would spend the rest of my life honoring that gift, helping others find their own freedom, building a world where being the strong one didn't mean being the one who broke. The night air was cool against my skin. Compass meowed from inside, calling me back to warmth. I stood up, taking one last look at the city lights, and I went inside. I closed the door behind me, shutting out the past, locking in the present, and I was home. This is Revenge Stories, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Help us build this community so we can bring more interesting and exciting stories for you from around the world. Your help is much appreciated. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, you deserve to choose yourself. Always.